Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Yelle Conversations. I'm filmmaker Arthur Musah, and today I'm joined by producer Nana Adwoa Frimpong to talk about a remarkable film I had the chance to see at the Toronto International Film Festival last year. So this was back in September, where it had its world premiere. The film is called The Eyes of Ghana. The documentary tells the story of Kwame Nkrumah, the leader who championed Ghana's independence and helped inspire liberation movements across Africa. But it does so through a fascinating lens, the eyes of the cinematographer who filmed his rise and fall, Chris Hesse. In many ways, it's a film about not just, the history, but also about how cinema itself has this extraordinary power to shape how a nation sees itself. The premiere at TIFF was sold out, but I managed to catch the press and industry screening. And I remember stepping out of the theater feeling very proud. Proud to be Ghanaian, proud to be African, and proud to be a filmmaker. It's one of those films that reminds you that storytelling can also be an act of historical preservation and recovery. My guest today, Nana Adwoa Frimpong, is a storyteller and producer of Ghanaian origins, and she can tell us a little bit more about that. And she's also the vice president of partnerships and impact at Breakwater Studios, a two-time Academy Award winning filmmaking company in Los Angeles. In her role, Nana helps connect the studio's original and branded films to broader impact goals through storytelling, strategic partnerships, and communications. She completed her master's degree at the University of Southern California School of Cinematic Arts. Go USC. I went there as well, so very proud to have a fellow USC film person on this chat, on this conversation. And more impressively, she was a George Lucas scholar. The Eyes of Ghana is the first feature documentary she's produced, and it is executive produced by Barack and Michelle Obama. So, Nana, welcome to Yelle. I'm really glad to have you here.
Thank you. The honor is mine. Thank you, thank you, thank you. What a great introduction.
So yeah, I like to start at the beginning. And so I'm wondering about what's the first time you remember being sort of in awe of cinema or storytelling?
Mm. So I am one of three girls, and this was like a memory that recently came to mind. But when we were younger, my mom at night, she used to read these like romance novels, like with Fabio on the cover and everything.
Mills and Boone, maybe? I used to read some of those in high
Yeah,
school too.
my mom used to read these, and I don't know how it started, but she would tell us what she read. And so my sisters and I would gather in her room, and she would begin to narrate what was happening in the story.
Oh,
And
wow.
she would leave it on a cliffhanger and be like, come back tomorrow, come back tomorrow. And I feel like that was the first time that I realized that a story could hook you and that who was telling the story mattered,
Mm,
and that you could be curious. And, I didn't have any filmmaking sense, at least consciously, until really I went to university and I took a filmmaking class or a film themes and theories class, where we just analyzed films from different eras. And that was the first time that I remember thinking, oh, wow, this is a medium. Storytelling, image making is a medium that deserves like earnest pursuit, and there's
mm.
something else here. But that of course was when I was like 20. Yeah.
Was this in Canada?
This was in Canada at the
Okay.
University of Toronto.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, could you maybe fill us in a little bit about where you grew up, where you're from, where your family's from, and I guess I'm sensing an immigrant kind of journey in there.
Okay.
I mean, this story about your mom kind of narrating, romance novel plots to you is like fascinating. I love it.
Yeah. My parents immigrated separately to Canada um over 35 years ago now. And they happened to also live like a block away from each other in Ghana, but didn't know each other until they met in Vancouver, Canada.
That's a romance novel
I
plot.
know that's why. That's why she loves a romance novel. And yeah, had my sisters and I in Canada, and you know, we grew up going to Ghana. So I always thought of myself or knew of myself as 100% Canadian and 100% Ghanaian. That
Mm,
was just how I identified. And I actually spoke the language. I spoke Tree until I started school, and then I just stopped speaking. I wish I could go back and just like shake myself and say, don't stop. Um,
I feel
but
you.
yeah, yeah, so I grew up in Vancouver till I was 18, and then I moved to Toronto to pursue my undergrad degree, which at the time was in English, Women's and Gender Studies, and Media Studies. Again, not thinking actively about being a filmmaker or working in film at all. I actually didn't, for a long time, I wanted to be a social worker. I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be both of those things. But I always knew that I wanted to be where the people were. It was really important to me to be at the center of people and storytelling and community. And I think I got so much of that from my parents because growing up, our home was also the home where everybody gathered. Like Christmas was never just the five of us. It was always like an uncle who just became an uncle
Mm,
and an auntie I didn't know. And everyone was always so fascinating and had so much richness to what they had to share. And so I think that very easily bled into what I was interested in when it came to school.
I see. I see.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And so you credit a course you took in college for revealing the power of storytelling and cinema specifically to you. Could you tell us a little bit more about when, you moved from being a lover of film to somebody who wanted to make cinema? And
Mm.
I believe you ended up at USC, right, to study
Yes.
filmmaking. Tell us a little
Yes,
bit about that.
exactly. So it really was. So up until that point, when I took that cinema class, I really had no big feelings about film. I mean, I would watch the Academy Awards every year. I loved going to the movies, but as a the thought of being like a practitioner was like not even sort of in my consciousness. Um, and I picked that class because I had one day to pick a class, and I just was like, I think I like film, so let me just pick this one. And my professor, Dr. Sarah Seljuki, who's like still one of my favorite people, the first film we reviewed was Young Mr. Lincoln that featured Henry Fonda. And I can't even tell you what the specifics of that conversation were like, but I knew that the minute we started talking about the film, I was like completely riveted by the conversation and just the fact that you could have an in-depth conversation about a film. Up until that point, I just thought you would go to the movies and, my sisters and I would be like, yeah, we like that film. We didn't like that film. And that's kind of where the conversation ended.
Mm,
Being in that class made me realize and appreciate that no, the color is blue because it has to be blue. Like the actor is that actor because it has to be that actor. And I think the intention behind the medium was the thing that really struck me because, I had pursued an English degree because I'm a lover of words. Reading and writing is like my first love. And so to see that translated into a medium like film was just like overwhelming for me. And sort of the next question I remember asking myself was, well, if if in my viewing of films, I'm watching portrayals of people who look like me, um, and that many times I find to be like reductive or just like untrue, who are the people who is making that? And that was the first time it really dawned on me. I'm like, oh wow, there's a whole industry behind this thing.
mm,
And also there's not enough. Actually, at the time, I don't think I realized like there's not enough of people who look like us making things about people like us. But it was the first sort of moment of like, oh, what does that actually mean? What does it mean to grow up in Canada and portrayals of like blackness and womanness and girlhood? Um, that story being told by someone who's never had my experience. How did that shape who I am and sort of
Mm,
the anxieties and insecurities that I feel, and what can I do to participate in changing that narrative? That was the first time I asked myself that question. And honestly, it scared me because I didn't know anybody who made films and I didn't even know what it meant to like make a film. So, and I had grown up in a family with like academic, so many people in my family are teachers and nurses, and my sister's a lawyer. So I just sort of didn't know what to do with those questions and sort of tried to bury them for a long time because it overwhelmed me.
mm, mm. That's powerful. It reminds me actually of when I was in college. I did engineering, but I always had like one writing class that I would take because it was like a humanities course. Sorry, there was a humanities requirement, right? So
Yeah.
there were, like it was built into curriculum that you had to take, and most engineering students hated having to do that, but I loved it because I've always been
Yes.
into storytelling.
Yes.
And I guess in those moments, I always kind of back in those college days when I wrote, I thought about how, back in Ghana and maybe largely on the African continent, there's this like push for development, and there's always the first thought is to invest in obviously science, engineering, doctors, because we need to build that infrastructure, right? But I wondered if and that's what we've been doing. That's what we've been prioritizing for so long. But story, either
Yeah.
written or told or narrated, is so underinvested on some level. And I wondered if that was slowing our ability to sort of self-reflect as a society. Where have we been? Who are we now? Where are we going? Right? And like that story has that potential to allow us to look at what we're doing more critically. And I wondered if we poured the some of those scarce resources that we have into story, if it might accelerate quote unquote development as a whole. I don't know the answer to that question, but it's an interesting theory, and I feel like a lot of people are playing with that idea, right? I mean, I think there's a version of what you just stated is also coming to that sort of awareness that I was coming to in college as well.
Yeah.
At USC, you directed a documentary in the 547 class. So it's like one of three documentaries that get made at an advanced level every semester. And it's very competitive to try and get to direct one. I mean, so you propose the idea, you execute it as the visionary behind it. And so it's very prestigious to get one of those slots, and you got it. And I haven't seen the film, but Mark Harris, who's an esteemed professor, I
My
think
guy.
he's retired, but he was a mentor of mine and clearly a mentor of yours, had great things to say about your film. So could you tell us about that experience of USC and that film that you made? What was it about, and what did it do for you in terms of your growth as a filmmaker and as a storyteller?
Yeah. Well, I will say about USC, I didn't know, I'm probably like one of one. I didn't know what USC was. So embarrassing to say now, but I truly, again, I wasn't one of those people who like grew up knowing that I wanted to do this. And so it uh, film schools in general were just sort of I had no concept of. And so I remember Googling like best film schools and USC came up. And I thought USC and UCLA were the same thing for too long, like way too long. Um, and I'm like, they're both in Los Angeles, so I guess like what's going on?
Similar initials or
Yeah,
abbreviation, right?
right?
Like you see.
Um, and so and because I grew to be more grateful for this after, I was so happy to have had another degree or had done something before coming to USC because it's exactly what you said. It's highly competitive and people dream of going to USC their whole lives and it's amazing because it is amazing. There's a lot of opportunity, but I feel like I was able to fully grasp that or at least come to some level of consciousness in a real way because I had done something else and now was coming to do my master's, and I wanted to do my master's and I wanted to learn. I had never made a film before going to film school, and I had never seen a real script before going to film school, and I had never used editing software. So I really rolled up. I really rolled up, but I also think I was like prayed up. Like I knew that I was supposed to be in film school and that I loved story, and I was hopeful that I would learn the tools, but sort of like what I innately wanted to say, which is that, having an identity as an immigrant, a Black person, a woman, etc., like all of those things matter and get to be seen and
Mm.
revered in the same way that, other stories get to be told. So that was the energy that I took into film school. And I'm happy that I knew my intention, because I think it was really hard. It was really hard to be in rooms with people who, wanted this so badly. And sometimes like that would come out in problematic ways with what people would say. But also it came out in really helpful ways. I think I found a lot of great community there. People who were as serious and like dedicated to doing things like me. And when it came to making my documentary, again, because my intention really was just to learn and expose myself to everything. I did sound, I produced, I directed, I wrote. Someone had asked me to produce their documentary. And just like in a moment, I was like, well, why don't I direct one? I just had, for the first time, just had that inclination.
Mm.
And that's how I got to do 547, and of course, like learned that you have to pitch for it and that only a few people are selected. And I really struggled with what the topic would be, because, again, this is my first time doing a documentary. And I'm like, what is interesting enough? And how do I get other people to be interested in it with me to spend their whole semester making something? And I you know, kind of just came back to myself, and I was like, well, why did I come to film school? And I was like, well, I came to film school in part because I wanted to articulate the very specific lived experiences of myself and that of the people that I love that also look like me. And I'm like, well, and why did I choose film? I chose film because it's a medium by which so many people can be exposed to, people from different walks of life. And it also is sort of a soft introduction to topics that might otherwise be difficult for people to engage with. And so I was like, well, healing, Black woman, art, that could be something. And so that was the beginnings of what became my thesis film, which is called um, Healing in Color, which is just about, women from all the way from 18 to 65, I think was our oldest lady, who have turned to art for refuge and a way to, yeah, articulate themselves and participate in a world that often feels like it's not interested in
Mm.
our participation. How do you like literally write yourself or draw yourself or speak yourself into existence and have and make, and in the same way make room for other people to do the same thing. So that's what it was. And I really enjoyed it. I mean, I remember the first interview I sat down to do, I thought, oh, this is what I've always wanted, which is to just bear witness to
Mm.
people, and to like, if what is a documentary? For me, it's reverence of being. There's nothing more dramatic or cinematic than a life. I don't have to make anything up. And that was like very relieving for me. So
That's
that's
powerful.
it.
That's powerful. Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
it was.
That's powerful. Beautiful. Um, okay, so you did USC and now
Yeah.
you work at Breakwater Studios.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about what the company does and specifically about your work there?
Yeah. So Breakwater Studios is a short documentary filmmaking company in LA. And we do a mix of branded content and original content. So when I say branded, I mean, we have partners like LinkedIn, L'Oreal,
Mhm.
We just made a series with McDonald's, all with the aim of helping articulate a business's problems in some cases, or helping to sort of unearth an aspect of their business that they want articulated to their customers or new people. And so that we have that side of the business, then we also have our original side, which is where we make films like The Last Repair Shop or The Eyes of Ghana. And those are our sort of like heart, you know, in our wildest dreams, what's the thing that we can create? And both speak to each other. I mean, we are a full-time staff of 20 people, and we work with key freelancers in the roles of editors and cinematographers. And every film, whether it be original or branded, is touched by the same people.
Okay.
So at our company, like a film is a film is a film in that way. And we hold our sort of bar of excellence even higher than anyone else, because for us, it begins at story. You know, a company will come to us and say, this is the problem that I have, and I want to reshape people's understanding of this in this way. And for us, it just goes back to, okay, well, what story can we tell? Like, who is the perfect agent to make sure that that is done and done with the same sort of reverence and earnestness that you need? And my role is really, I kind of sit in the middle of those things. I've had different roles at the company since I've been here.
Okay.
But currently, I'm the person who, once the film is made or in the making of, we're always thinking about how it can reach the most people. Like, what is the impact that it can do in the world? And so my role is to strategize with the team about, like, well, what does that look like? How do we show up? So for example, for The Eyes of Ghana, okay, well, we want to do a screening in this place. Who would be a great person to moderate that conversation? Who are the people and partners that we can like work with to make sure that the most people have it seen and things like that? That's where I sort of do my thing.
You're still producing.
It's still
That's
producing. Yeah, a
producing.
lot of so a lot of like relationships and like making connections and introducing people to other people and seeing what's possible.
Amazing. Wonderful. So I guess that brings us to, the big film, your first feature producing project, The Eyes of Ghana. Tell us a little bit about how that project came to be. Where did the idea come from? And how did you get involved in that?
So basically, that film, we had made another film several years ago in Ghana for UNICEF. And it
Mm.
was at that time that, he was in Ghana and he had passed by the Kwame Nkrumah mausoleum. And for anybody who's seen it, you know that it's a very particularly shaped building. So it catches your eye if you don't have any context for it.
And Ben
And
is the director
Ben
of
is the
the film.
director. Yes, Ben Proudfoot is the director. And, you know, he's a fellow Canadian and having grown up in Nova Scotia, had no context for who Kwame Nkrumah was, had never heard the name before. And one of our fellow producers, Justice, just so happened to be in the car and was like, well, I know the person who he had a personal cinematographer, Kwame Nkrumah, and he's still alive and he's 90 years old and he lives down the road.
Wow.
And it was like, well, we have to go there. And it was also at that time that I was still at USC, but I had started interviewing filmmakers. And I was about to interview Ben for the first film that he and Chris Bowers were nominated for an Academy Award. A Concerto is a Conversation. And, you know, he was like, I keep seeing it. He's like, are you Ghanaian too? Because I'm in Ghana and I keep seeing versions of your name everywhere. And I just want to know what the connection is. And I was like, I am. And he told me about Chris Hesse. And he said, I think there's a story to tell here. And I think we should tell it. And so that really began the journey, which was
Mm.
close to, I don't know, 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago now. And it was going to be a short film for a very, very long time.
Mm.
And then we just had so much, there was so much story to tell that it emerged into a feature film. But, we didn't know what it was for a long time. I think we were trying to figure out what point of view, how much Nkrumah to include, how do we center Chris Hesse, all those things. So it took the time that it took because of those conversations.
Did you know that there was all this archival material and
We did
you
at the
did from
start
the
of it.
start?
At the start of it, we did, but we had never seen it. We hadn't
Mm,
seen it yet. So Chris Hesse just spoke of it in his interview, and we're like, "That's really amazing, and that's definitely something that needs to be part of this film." But sort of and we knew broad strokes because he would talk about it, what the content of it was. But again, I think when you hear about it and then when you see it, it's something else. Because I mean, you've seen the film, like just the texture and color alone and the vibrancy of the people is like complete. It's so striking. And to know that Chris shot that too at 30.
yeah,
Yeah.
like this
It
is history, 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 right?
was history.
Um, I was gonna bring this up later, but since we're talking about that, I think for me, one of the most striking moments from the archival material was that moment where Nkrumah is meeting Kennedy. And I believe it's in the US sometime in the 60s.
Oh, I have, yeah.
There's a press conference. Kennedy's, saying some niceties, things that seem not nice, right? Oh, Nkrumah's a great person, was happy to introduce him to my family and my daughter and or
Yeah.
my kids. Blah blah blah, and then he's about to leave without Nkrumah saying anything, and Nkrumah's like, "Wait, can I say can I say a little something?" So Nkrumah says a line, and then Kennedy leaves, and there's this silence. I mean, it's a press conference, but there's this like silence, and Nkrumah breaks the ice. He's like, "Don't make the questions too hard," and he laughs and all of that, and then come to reveal the film reveals that what's happened at the time was the Cold War tensions, where the U.S. felt like Nkrumah was taking the Russia side, and therefore, you can imagine the behind the scenes conversations that had just happened before that, and to have seen, I mean, for me, when I think about Nkrumah, it's that speech, the Independence Day speech or night speech, which does make it into the eyes of Ghana, right? The iconic speech about being free forever. But to see all these other aspects of who he was, and just glimpses, but they're so powerful. What was it like to see that moment specifically for the first time, and probably others? Like, how did that archive have an impact on you?
Ooh, in so many ways. I think firstly, and we get into this in the film. I think it's easy. Well, first of all, for many people watching this film, it's the first time that they're going to be introduced to him, let alone hear that name. And so we knew that we weren't making the seminal Kwame Nkrumah film. And to be clear, that film needs to be made.
Mhm.
Um, but I think so, and I think in that way we sort of were able to, I want to say, I think there's the conversation that we're having with about Kwame Nkrumah in the film is that he was multifaceted, and that for many people he remains this great hero who did what he said he was going to do. He liberated a continent and a people. He was successful in that way.
Mhm.
But he also was ridiculed and, you know, cast out for other things too, which are also valid as well. And so for us making the film, it was like, we're not interested in making a film that says he is the most glorious person in the world. And we're also not interested in making a film that says he's the worst person in the world. He was great for the greatness that he brought forward. And to show that, it was important to show him, yes, giving that great speech at Independence Day, um, being in those moments with President Kennedy, but also seeing him fly a plane, like a little paper plane, and seeing him dance. Like, it was also important that we saw him as like a person that set out to have with an extraordinary goal and was successful in part in big parts in a lot of ways. And so for me watching it all, it was amazing because again, our history books don't teach us about Kwame Nkrumah. And it's really unfortunate. There's so many leaders that get left out of the pages of history out of like convenience or whatever you want to call it. And to see a leader with the skin that I have speaking about freedom, it just reminded me that, like our heroes do and can look like us, and that like we come from such an elegant and powerful people, which previously I think I maybe like I knew, but didn't always have the good fortune of like seeing.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And the film covers that. The film makes a strong, makes that point very clearly. It actually also was informative. I did not know that Nkrumah was deeply aware about the power of narrative, or specifically cinema, to shape how a nation views itself, but also how it's viewed on the outside. And so, there's the section of your film. I don't think I'm giving too
Yeah.
much away about how he set up the most impressive, or the leading studio
Yeah.
in Africa, to the point
Yeah.
where like South Africa was coming to Ghana,
Yeah.
and South Africans were coming to Ghana to use the facilities and all of that. And so there was definitely, you see, for me, I knew about Nkrumah before, but there were all these new facets that your film revealed to me. And then, of course, seeing these visuals that Chris Hesse captured so many years ago
Yeah.
was like mind blowing. Um, okay. So, so sometimes when I tell, I'm meeting people and I tell them, oh, I'm producing a film, they're like, oh, what does that mean?
Oh,
What's the like, I'm producing and directing. What's the difference? Blah, blah, blah.
yeah.
So could you talk a little bit about your producing experience on this project, how it was different from short films, what producing is on a day-to-day basis? I'd love if you can maybe to share what were the big challenges, right, in producing on this project, and what is an example of a solution you're particularly proud of?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great big question because I feel like when I got to film school, even I was still like, what is I would always like whisper, like, what's a producer? Like, what's happening? I know I'm producing this film, but I don't know what I'm doing. So, but I think that's in part what it is at its core. It's you having to, it's different things at different times. But I think the core of it is bringing together great teams, making sure that if you're going north, everyone's going north. It's raising money, it's promoting the film, it's you know, ensuring, I think of it as just like ensuring everything and everyone is on track and where they need to be. I mean, when it came to um, and I think for me, everything is sort of like inherently producerial in that way. Like even
Mhm.
when I was directing my 547 in film school, I was still producing because it still looked like, calling the storytellers, talking them through what we were going to shoot, hearing what maybe their anxieties were about the shoot, um, convincing people to come aboard the project, convincing people to give you money, all of those elements are present. So when it came to this film in particular, I mean, the things that you imagine were there in terms of, assembling a crew, um, uh, making connections in terms of relationships, who our partnership with Higher Ground, for example, making sure that we were in lockstep on like in terms of what the story was at every point. But when it came to production, I think that's where my sort of my if it's my evolving gift as a producer and my cultural background met, because, in America or maybe other parts of the world, you can go, if you need to film somewhere, you can say, this is the paperwork in all this lawyer speak. I need you to sign it so that I can come and do my thing here. That's not how
Mm,
it works in Ghana. In Ghana, it's about like it's relationship, right?
mm,
You can't get into the legalese of it all. And so it was important that when we shot at Independence Square, we met with the people there and we were like, this is what we want to do. This is why it's important. This is how it's going to show up so that everybody understood what was happening. Because I think, you know, using our North American point of view to sort of like make a film about Africa and Africans, it wasn't going to work. Like we knew very quickly that having the buy-in of the people was what was necessary to be successful. And so that was one way that being a producer showed up and continues to show up. I feel like so much of the job for me on this one has been just like relationships, honestly. And I feel very grateful to have had the team that we have because I look back and I'm like, we literally needed everybody. Anita was so key to that in terms of introducing us to Mr. Otto, which of course gave us access to Rex Cinema. And Chris Hesse and Anita already had a relationship. So that meant
mm.
that, there were certain shortcuts that we did certain things we didn't have to like navigate by virtue of everybody being really familial and wanting to help the project. So in basic terms, producing is connecting the dots. I'll say that.
I love that. That's a great summary, connecting the dots.
Connecting the
And I
dots.
love the other thing you said about making sure that if you're moving north, everyone's moving north.
Everyone's moving north.
Right. Okay. Yes. No, that's a great way to put it. I really like that.
Yeah.
Um, is what can you tell us about how this film was funded or financed, and then also how the Obamas got involved?
Yeah. So very early on with this film, we were fortunate to have like independent producers who felt called to the film and to the subject matter contribute. Um, so that's how we were able to do it in the beginning and in part Breakwater and financing the film. The film was made independently.
Okay.
Um, and when it came to Higher Ground, we had worked with them on another short film called The Turnaround. Um, and it just so happened, again, it's going to sound wild, but it's like it just so happened that their two executives had come by our offices and we were cutting some part of the Ghana film. I can't recall. I think we had come back from like the first early shoot or something, but we were cutting that and they were like, what is this? What are you all cutting? What's happening? And we told them about the film and they're like, oh, well, we would love to part. That sounds like something that would so be perfect for Higher Ground. And it was even more amazing because when we looked into it, there's that moment in the film where Kwame Nkrumah is giving the speech at the All African Peoples Conference. I always get that name wrong. And to his right, there's a dashing young man by the name of Tom Mboya, who was the person who was responsible for taking young people from the African continent to the States and allowing them access to different schooling opportunities, etc.
Hmm.
And one of the benefactors of that was Obama Sr. And so
Ah,
it was this wonderful sort of like full circle moment and his son comes back to tell the whole story. So it was from
wow.
the beginning, yeah, very powerful. So from the beginning, it just felt like the perfect connection. And I think in our wildest dreams, working with Higher Ground was that dream. We just thought of, we didn't know about the connection with Tom and Boya, but just thinking about a person who speaks across all aisles and is that formal introduction to African and American,
Hmm.
especially for a film that, like, let's be real, so many people can't even say his name, didn't even know his name, Kwame Nkrumah, that is. And so for somebody like a Barack Obama to, get behind this film is a huge, huge like plus, huge boon to
Indeed.
yeah.
Amazing. Wonderful. No, it makes sense, the partnership.
Yeah.
I actually was kind of curious, a little bit more of like a film nerd. I noticed there was like a very intentional like visual grammar and obviously the epic cinematic score had like the, a little bit classic but modern as
Yeah.
well. And there were just a couple of questions I was curious about. Like I was wondering if the modern day footage was all shot on film. Um, it was?
It was, no, it was not. There were moments of
Okay.
that. There were moments of that, but when you at the end, well, the portraits at the end where you meet like Anita, Chris, those were shot on IMAX cameras.
Okay.
So the moment at the end of the Rex where we pan past the flare of the projector screen, that's when it switches to IMAX.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And that was intentional because we wanted basically to show Hesse in the highest resolution, like in the same way that you see the film digitized and restored throughout
Mm.
the film itself. We wanted by the end for you to be in the highest resolution as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And then it's got a very unique frame, the 4:3, right, throughout it. And I've seen films where it's like, okay, the archival is in the archival frame, but then the modern day footage is but your entire film is in 4:3. Was that what was that choice about?
Yeah, well, it's such a Breakwater signature, and it
Uh,
really comes from, Ben's inclination to want to always be up close and see people's faces.
mm,
In an interview frame, he's like, I'm not really interested in like your shoulders or what's going on with your knees. I really just want to see like every crevice of your face, and because it's so telling, right? And I love that because I love portraiture and I love faces. And so I love that in so many instances, even in our film, that there are quiet moments where you're just looking at their face, but it's saying everything. And we really wanted the intention to be there. And of course, like the focus on the eyes was crucial to that too.
right. Okay. And then, again, focus on the eyes.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you used anything like the Errol Morris in Interrotron, because he also has
Yes.
film subjects look directly into the lens. And so like when you're watching it as an audience, they're speaking to you directly,
Yes.
right?
Yes. That's
You,
definitely Aaron Morris is a huge inspiration for Ben. So
okay.
100%. And we use the Interrotron. Yeah, we use the Interrotron
Okay,
for everything. So yeah,
cool.
exactly.
Yeah, those were like, I was curious
Yeah.
about those things.
Yeah.
Um, Great. So there's a large idea in your film, right, about who controls the image, controls the story, about a country, about a people. Where do you see that dynamic today, globally or in Ghana? Is there battle to control narrative going on?
I think as long as there are people around, of course.
And how are we as Africans playing in
Yeah.
that sort of struggle for our narrative, for control of our narrative? Where are we with that,
Yeah.
in your opinion and observation?
There's several moments in the film where Chris Hesse says, like, keep on filming, right? And yes, it's a beautiful poetic moment in the context of the film, but I think it speaks to like the larger need, which is that your voice, whoever you are, civilian, soldier, you know, person of power, like we need to see what's happening and we get to document what's happening. We get to like have a real conversation about what's happening and tell the truth about what's happening. You know, Moses Boyo is one of our producers on the film, and he made a film called Bobby Wine, the People's President. And he talks about being shot in at the face, trying like capturing this political moment in Uganda and believing that that was his duty. Like when you ask him, like, were you scared? He's like, I wasn't really scared. I just knew that I had to do it, or it was part of my duty as a civilian to capture what was happening and what the people were saying. And I think it's that level of like both a desire to participate, but also the knowing that you have to participate that I see with my peers, I see in Anita, despite all of the hardships that go into trying to make something move in Ghana, get to make this film, we still insist that we have to show it and to tell it because like someday somewhere, like in the same way that Chris Hesse felt 60 plus years ago, it's going to be used for the purpose of. And I think, I mean, I see that spirit in so many people, not just young across the continent who are like, there's a better way and we love this country and we love this continent and we're going to try for it. And as somebody who doesn't live in Ghana, doesn't know the everyday realities of what it means to be in Ghana, but believes so deeply in where I'm from and my Ghanaian identity, I am excited to participate in that. And I hope that the film is one way that I am showing up in that conversation. If only it means posing the question of like, okay, well, what do we do now? Like how can we use what our elders said to further what our expectation is of not only this country, but this like the world and how the world sees us.
Right. Yeah, as you were speaking, it reminded me of that moment in the film where Chris Hesse, I guess, is rewatching a
Yeah.
reel that he shot for the first time, probably in 60 years, right? Something he shot years ago. I guess it's been restored,
Yeah.
and he gets emotional. And yeah, sometimes you're creating something, you're exercising that right to speech, or you're
Yeah.
exercising your agency for speech, whether it's in written form, whether it's in oral narration, whether it's sharing information with some speaking out about something, whether it's in protest, whether it's in film. And I think sometimes it feels like, oh, this is insignificant. Why am I writing this blog? Why am I documenting this protest? Why am I writing this short story, right? Nobody's going to see it, but um, it's important.
It's
Keep
important.
filming, keep
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 filming.
filming, as he
Keep
says,
filming.
right?
Yeah.
Um, that's powerful. Now, what's happening with the archive? I know there was I noticed the card in your film towards the end says 15 minutes
Yeah.
of Ghana Surviving Film Archive appears in The Eyes of Ghana, your film. But there's 300 hours or so that's waiting unseen. What's How difficult and expensive is the restoration that would be needed? What's happened? What's the status of that? And, will the public be able to watch it anytime soon?
Yeah. I mean, the latter part of your question is our goal. I mean, we haven't even seen everything, and what you see in the film is what our credit card could handle. And of
There
course,
are limits to
there
credit
are
card
limits.
limits.
There are limits. Um, but yeah, and so making that available is something that we want to work with everyone to have that be the case. But the footage, belongs to the Ghanaian government,
Mm.
and Chris Hesse has been in this pursuit for, the decades that he's been in it, and so I think certainly this film has um, reinvigorated a lot of conversations and has, you know, put to go back to your previous question, has like put storytelling on the map and the need and the desire and need for this to be seen. But where it currently exists is with Chris Hesse and the government. I mean, they are actively in conversation about digitizing and restoring this footage and making it available. And so we're hopeful that soon it can actually be made available and they can do well on the promise that several governments have been making.
That would be wonderful because I do think there's a certain curiosity about archive in particular. I think as human beings, we want to know where we came from. And I think, we want to see those images, right? There's a sudden, I mean, yes, there's the nostalgia of like digging up the photo of yourself at like 3 or, your parents, when they got married and being able to go back and imagine the scenes, right? From
Yeah.
that one photo, they spark all these narratives in our imaginations. And I see that happening on Twitter specifically, also, and maybe like Facebook, social media in general, where people unearth photographs, archival photos of like Ghana, of Nigeria,
Yeah.
of Africa, of like this is where, of this moment. I think while I was doing, preparing for this episode, I saw something on Twitter about I think the 10th anniversary of Independence Day in Ghana, and there was a party, a high life party at the beach, like Labadi Beach or something like that, and people were dancing, and it's in black and white. And I'm like, it's fantastic to be able to be taken back there, and these are the tools with which we as a people, we as individuals get to go there. And
Yeah.
so I think it's beautiful that you got to make this film. Thank you so much for doing that
Thank
and
you.
for sharing it with the world. I have a couple more questions. You premiered at TIFF, which is a huge film festival. It's one of the top 5 film festivals in the world, so it's a great premiere. I'm curious about what that unlocked for the film and for you, this premiere. What went well? What would you do differently next time? As a first time feature producer.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's what you said. I mean, I went to school in Toronto, so it was this beautiful full
Mm.
circle just personally for me to have always passed the marquee at TIFF and been like, how do you even try to get a film at TIFF? And to be back, like genuinely, like, how does your name get up there? And then be the opening night for documentaries. That's a God thing. That's a God thing. That's a God thing. So that was wild. But we I think, in retrospect, we're so grateful to have premiered at TIFF because it's also the largest public audience
Mm,
festival. Like, and it's a film for the people. That's the other thing. It's a film for the people. It needs to be accessed by the people. I think the thing that, going back this was our first TIFF experience, so I didn't know how it worked in terms of like how do you get tickets to go to the premiere,
mm,
blah blah blah. But I think, having more Ghanaian people in the room is something that I always want advocate for or
mm,
want. I think that's important. Toronto, most especially, has such a rich and large Ghanaian population. And they weren't really there at TIFF, unfortunately.
mm.
And so, we've done a lot of work since then to reach out to different like Ghana associations and any sort of, and which is my role, right? Any sort
Yeah.
of partners to like let people know about the screening because I mean, of course, it means so much to us to have anyone say great things about the film. Um, but it means something different to me in particular when a fellow Ghanaian says something to me about the film because I know that we're speaking about it on like a different level, and we haven't been glorified in the way of an Eyes of Ghana, on a main stage, and that's important. That's important, and I hope that this isn't the last time. It shouldn't be.
I know, I think I saw that you had another screening in Toronto
Yes.
recently for Black History Month, right?
Yes, with the
Uh,
City of Toronto and the Pan-African Film Festival.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So tell me about, you have your big world premiere at TIFF, and then where else has the film traveled? And when, most importantly, when is it premiering in Ghana?
Yes. So the film has traveled, we've been so fortunate, like all over the world. After TIFF, our next big one was or big one in terms of Chris Hesse being able to participate because London was
Mm,
close enough, was the BFI London Film Festival. And then we premiered at Hamptons and We've been to Dock NYC. We recently just were at Santa Barbara. We'll be at True False this weekend. In Kenya, we were at the NBO festival.
You
So
won both the best doc and the jury.
yes,
A
at a
couple
free,
at a Friff, right?
yeah, a
What
free,
was that
yes.
like?
Oh my, that was wild because we just literally, I think it was we were on Instagram and we saw it and we're like, oh wow, guys, we didn't know ahead of time that we were going to win. So
Okay.
we found out when everybody else found out, and it was so exciting and validating to see that because I mean, no expectation that
Right.
we were gonna win something like that. But and yeah, and so we're currently also working on our Ghana screenings, which will be happening in April. So details to come, or maybe by the time this is out, details are out. So good.
Yes. I will keep me posted and I'll post the
Yes,
episode around that so that
perfect.
it drops just in time for the Ghana
Perfect.
screening.
Thank you.
I think people will be in for a treat with this film in Ghana, and I'm curious to hear the reactions to it and to this unearthing of this important archive. Um, so back to you, and curious about what the next steps you're envisioning for your career. What's up?
Yeah.
What's going on next? What's happening next?
Oh gosh. So in terms of like my day-to-day breakwater gig, we have a new short film called The Baddest Speechwriter of All
Mm,
with Steph Curry. So Ben and Steph Curry co-directed that one, and it's Steph Curry in his directorial debut, and it's about Martin Luther King Jr.'s former lawyer and draft speechwriter, Clarence B. Jones, who is 95 years old this year. And so we have an old thing for an older gentleman at Breakwater. And
well, they've lived a lot of life. They've seen a
lived a
lot
lot
of
of
like
life,
big
you
moments
know?
and had a moment to like
Exactly.
time to
Exactly.
digest that. It made waves
Exactly.
at Sundance, no?
It did. It did. It won the grand jury at Sundance, which is also, yeah, that was also another one. I was so sick at the end of Sundance, so I was like sitting in the back, and then
Uh,
they started to describe the film, and I just slowly rose up, and I went to like join the team. So that was a huge win for us because I mean, we've also been working on that film for so many years, and you never know what something is until other people see it sometimes. So that was a big one. But for me, I just continue. I feel in so many ways like the same person who went to film school in terms of just wanting to continue to be where the people are. Like
mm,
conversations like this are so meaningful to me, where we get to talk about not just the art, but like what it means to be a person and how we're still going despite all of it. And so I'm excited about doing that or finding more ways to be in dialogue with people and to do storytelling, not just in terms of film. Film will always be a love of mine, but like, how does that translate into audio, into writing, into different mediums? As part of my job at Breakwater, we do like a lot of events.
mm.
Uh, and so, and I've always loved that, like the meeting of like film and conversation and music and things like that. So I'm interested in stretching my producerial hat into those worlds too.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think this conversation, I feel like if I were, in my teens, encountering this conversation, realizing I love story, I'm in awe of cinema and might want to do something in it, I think your story would be very inspirational. I'm wondering if there are any, nuggets of wisdom that you could share for somebody who's like trying to figure out, okay, here's where I am, especially as a young person. And I see and sense this power of storytelling, especially cinematic storytelling. And I'm drawn to the idea of creating cinema. How do I find my way into making films?
Ooh, yeah, it's such a big question, right? Because first of all, I think and I really believe this. I know people say it all the time, but like everyone's story is their story. And I felt that especially when it came to going to film school, because I remember asking everyone, should I go to film school? Is film school worth it? Like it's so expensive and it takes this amount of time and blah, 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 blah. And I realized after asking everyone in the world but myself that question that nobody really knows. Nobody really knows. And for me, what made me say, yes, this is something that I want to do is thinking about, okay, what kind of learner am I?
Mm,
The truth is that when people say like just pick up your cat when people would say pick up your camera and just go shoot something and like that would always like hurt me on some level because I'm like I don't know what is it, what camera do I pick up and what
mm,
am I shooting? Like I knew that I needed or wanted to be in school. I loved school. So I knew that I wanted to be in a bubble that allowed me to ask all of the questions and to fail and to be imperfect and yeah, if it was going to be 3 years, it was going to be 3 years. Like I needed that. That was like the real push for me. So I would say if you are, contemplating film school, and I also didn't have anyone I knew who made films. That's important because you know this too, Arthur, like it's such a community. It's such a community. And when you are down, you have five more people who are pushing you up.
yeah.
So you need that. And so I knew that going to film school would also allow me to be in community with people who would be as obsessed with what I was obsessed with without any question and hesitation. So I would say that sort of explore for yourself if film school is the way for you. And if you have a different path, that's also valid. We all end up where we're supposed to be when we need to be there. When I first got to film school, I was in rooms with people who had first and second careers, who had families, who had babies, you know, who were just there to just kind of learn. Everyone came with their own experience, but we were all in the same room. And, also I would say that my so much of my life has been like me feeling like I don't really know if I can do something. And and truly people around me, like true angels pushing me in a direction and being articulate when I felt deeply inarticulate.
Mm,
And so I'm not saying that, sometimes you have a dream and it just needs to incubate within you for a second. Like it's not something to share. And you'll know when it's time to share it. But I think when you know it's time to share your dream or you have an inkling that like you might be good at something, be careful who you tell. But when you're ready to tell it, and try because you never know. I could have never imagined I wasn't even thinking about USC film school or working in the industry. 18-year-old me would be like, what? Girl, how? But it was because I think I was like curious and I asked questions and I was earnest. I think it's okay to be serious, like take my when I first got to undergrad, the dean of the school or something said, uh, um, take it, but the thought was like, make sure you take it, but hold it loosely,
mm,
you know? And I always think about that. Like you can have your dream and ambition, and I do. I'm very ambitious, but also like let life be life.
mm.
Find that she is kind. She is kind. So
Go for it, but not with so much rigidity, right?
no,
Yeah.
no. And I say
Okay.
that as somebody who like still has so much rigidity about stuff. But
Yeah.
when you try so hard for something and maybe I hope everyone's had this experience where you've tried so hard for something and you didn't get it. And then there's that other moment where you've just sort of like you tried and you believed and then you got that plus so much more.
Mm.
That's the bag.
Brilliant, brilliant. This is so much wisdom
Yeah.
and such an inspiring story about your journey into
Thank
film, to making the eyes of Ghana. Thank you so much, Nana.
you.
This has been a delightful conversation. It's a powerful film, and I encourage everyone to go check it out, especially in Ghana when it arrives in April. Um, Thank you all for joining us for this episode of Yelle. If you enjoyed the episode, please consider subscribing on YouTube, share it with a friend who might enjoy this conversation as well, and let us know what resonated with you. Thanks again. This has been a conversation with Nana Adwoa Frimpong, producer of the brilliant film The Eyes of Ghana. Until next time, keep the conversation going.